From Surviving the Angel of Death, True Story of a Mengele Twin in Auschwitz, by Eva Mozes and Lisa Rojani Boccieri. Chapter 5. Being in Auschwitz was like being in a car accident every single day. Every single day something terrifying happened. Within 2 weeks, Miriam and I had to have our heads shaved. Like all the twins in our barracks, we were infested with head lice. Head lice, I learned, lay their eggs on human hair, and they can go from one head to another. The only way to get rid of them is to use a special shampoo or chemical treatment and comb hair daily with a fine-tooth knit comb. We had none of these things, so lice multiplied and spread from person to person, onto clothing and bedding. They were everywhere. Lice and fleas nested in our blankets, straw mattresses, and dresses. We were constantly scratching ourselves. Even with our hair chopped off, we still had lice. Miriam and I constantly picked lice off each other and tried to squeeze them dead between our fingernails. Once a week, twins had the privilege of taking a shower. Each of us received a bar of soap. In the huge shower room, we took off our clothes and left them in a pile to be disinfected. I learned that the chemical used to disinfect our clothing, Zyklon B, was one of the 3 chemicals used to gas people to death at Auschwitz. The Nazis combined Zyklon B, which came in gray-blue pellets, with hydrogen cyanide and diatomite to form the chemical mix for mass murder in the gas chambers. The gas, mixed with burning flesh and bones, created that stench I had noticed the first day. It is not a smell a human can ever forget. Miriam and I stayed close. We always stayed close. Before we washed, we stood in a tub of whitish liquid. It burned my legs and left red blotches. Sometimes the supervisors wiped down our heads and bodies, and the disinfectant stung my eyes. 40 or 50 twins showered at the same time. Dr. Mengele wanted us to be clean, and did occasionally have his assistants make attempts to clean up our barracks. Yet the filth and lice from the camp would always return, and we coped with it as best we could. One time we saw some boys at the shower. I remember looking at them and thinking, they're so skinny. I'm glad I don't look like that. Actually, I probably did look like that. Miriam, too. Her eyes were sunken, and I could count every bone in her body. But I did not feel skinny and pathetic. I needed to see myself as strong. Dr. Mengele set up a routine for us to follow. 3 days a week we were forced to march to the labs in Auschwitz for intensive studies that left us exhausted. The other 3 days we were in the blood labs in Birkenau. One day melded into the next. Every morning after roll call, Mengele came to our barracks for inspection. Smiling, he called us "Mein Kinde," my children. Some of the twins liked him and called him Uncle Mengele. Not I. I was terrified of him. Even in those days, I knew he did not care about us like a real doctor. On Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, we went to the blood lab. Miriam and I sat on a bench with another set of twin sisters. Someone tied our upper left arms and right arms with thin, flexible rubber hoses. 2 people worked on me at the same time. A doctor jabbed a needle into my left arm to take blood. He withdrew a vial's worth and then stuck me again. I could see hands taking away bright red vials of my blood. I remembered wondering, how much blood can I lose and still live? Meanwhile, a different doctor gave me an injection of something in my right arm. He stuck 5 needles in without removing the first one. What was he shooting into my remaining blood? I hated shots, but I refused to cry out in pain because I did not want to let the Nazis know they were hurting me. I coped by turning my head away and counting the shots until it was over. On our way back to the barracks, Miriam and I did not talk about the shots. I took those shots at the price we had to pay to survive. We gave them our blood, our bodies, our pride, our dignity, and in turn they let us live one more day. I cannot remember a single twin who did not cooperate. In those days, we didn't know what the experiments were for, or what we were injected with. Later we found out that Dr. Mengele purposely gave some twins dangerous, life-threatening diseases, such as scarlet fever, and then followed them with shots of something else to see if it cured the disease. Some shots were attempts to change the color of eyes. Older girls, many years after we were all liberated, told us Mengele had taken them to the lab and given them a transfusion of blood from a boy, and had transfused their blood into the bodies of boys. He wanted to discover a way to change girls into boys, and boys into girls. Many of these details I learned 40 years later, such as the twin teenage boys who had some of their private parts cut off in Mengele's quest to see if he could turn them into girls. One of those boys died in his bed right next to his twin, who said later, "I could feel my brother's body turning cold." It was said at the time that 6 sets of twins had gone to that lab and been killed. I never witnessed anyone being killed. I only knew that some of the twins disappeared. But I did eventually learn that the rumors were correct, that twins were dying from some of the experiments. We were told they had become very sick. Then Mengele would simply replace them with fresh sets of twins who had just arrived on transport trains. That is how even the most privileged prisoners at Auschwitz were viewed. Not even Mengele's favorites were treated as humans. We were replaceable, disposable. What was not replaced were our pretty matching dresses, which got so worn out we could no longer wear them. We were given women's clothing, but the clothing was too big. So Miriam and I tied strings around our waists to hold up the dresses. In the tops of our dresses we tucked anything we were carrying, like a metal cup or a piece of bread saved from the night before. In the morning before roll call, and on the days we went to the blood lab, we helped take care of the younger children. Outside our barracks, we had a fenced-in yard where we played with them. The older girls taught Miriam and me how to knit. We pulled pieces of barbed wire from the fencing, hid the wires against stone to loosen the barbs, and pulled them off. It took a long time. Then we sharpened the points of the wire on some rocks to make knitting needles. One of the twins had an old sweater that we took apart, saving the yarn. Each girl took a turn knitting until the yarn from the sweater was all used up. Then the next person would unravel the yarn, and we would start all over again. It was not about a finished product, a cap, a scarf, or socks. Knitting took our minds off of our troubles. But death and danger were never far away. One day when we were outside, a cart of dead bodies rolled by. We ran to the fence to see if we recognized any of the corpses. One girl cried out, "Mama! It's my mama!" and burst into tears. She sobbed, her anguish crescendoing into wails as the cart continued on its way. I felt sorry for her, but I did not know what to say. At that moment I realized that maybe our mother had also gone by on a cart of bodies. We just hadn't seen her. Every day those carts went by. Sometimes the prisoners on them were dead, sometimes only mostly dead. Regardless, they were all being carted away to their final resting place. Until that moment I had stopped thinking about my family. Maybe it was due to the bread we ate each evening that supposedly contained not only sawdust but a powder called bromide that made us forget memories of home, a sedative of some kind. Whatever it was or was not, I could not feel sorry for myself, for Miriam, for anyone. I could not think of myself as a victim, or I knew that I would perish. It was simple. For me, there was no room for any thought except survival. At night, Miriam and I lay in our bunk with 2 other sets of twins. We snuggled close, but did not talk or whisper. If I had told Miriam how hungry and miserable I was, it would only have made things worse. In the darkness, I heard a whistle, a car, or motorcycle going by. Noises of marching, moaning, vomiting, barking, and crying punctuated the hush of the camp, an orchestra accompanying the pervasive human misery. Occasionally, when our supervisors were asleep, our old friend from the neighboring village, Mrs. Csengeri, sneaked into our barracks to see her twin daughters. She was a smart, quick-witted woman. Upon her arrival at Auschwitz, she had convinced Dr. Mengele that she could help him by giving him information about her twins, so she had been allowed to stay in the women's barracks. Mrs. Csengeri brought her children food, underwear, hats, things she had taken or organized. Organizing was camp language for stealing from the Nazis. I envied those girls for having a mother who was still alive and caring for them. Miriam and I had only had each other. I could not think about Mama, Papa, or our older sisters anymore. I had to worry about Miriam and myself. I had to repeat to myself over and over, just one more day, just one more experiment, just one more shot. Just please, please, don't let us get sick. Chapter 8. As the summer of 1944 turned to autumn, things were changing. More and more airplanes roared overhead and bombed Nazi headquarters and factories. Sometimes there were 2 or 3 air raids a day. Although we had no radio or news, we realized the good guys were coming to free us. I had to keep my twin sister and myself alive until they arrived. Her life was my mission and responsibility, but conditions in the camp were not better. In some ways they were worse. During the night of October 7th, the sound of a huge explosion woke us up. Sirens wailed, dogs barked. What was happening? Later we found out that Jews of the Sonderkommando, prisoners forced to burn corpses of fellow prisoners, had rebelled and blown up Crematorium 4 in Birkenau. They had used explosives smuggled to them by a group of Jewish girls working in the Nazi explosive factory. The men of the Sonderkommando had decided they would rather go down fighting than die in the gas chamber. They wanted to take revenge for the death of family and friends. Rumors circulated that as the Allied forces, the Americans, British, and Soviet armies approached, the SS would kill everyone in the camp. Nevertheless, Dr. Mengele continued his experiments, still hoping to make an important scientific discovery. At that time, we did not know that orders had come from the Nazi High Command for Dr. Mengele to liquidate the gypsy camp, consisting of more than 2,000 prisoners, mostly women and children. Although Mengele had tried to preserve the gypsies for his research, he followed orders. They were taken to the gas chambers to be killed and then incinerated. Miriam and I and all the twins in our barracks were marched from our camp to the gypsy camp, now empty. The inmates had left behind blankets and colorful paintings on the walls. We did not know why the Nazis had transferred us to their camp. It was close to a gas chamber and crematorium, and the word went around that we were next to be gassed. On that first day, we stood outside in the cold for roll call, patches of snow covering the ground from 5 a.m. until 4 p.m. It was the longest roll call we had ever been through because a prisoner was missing. The smells of the crematorium were thick in the air, mixing with cold and fog. My feet froze, and so did my sister's. We never found out to where the prisoner had escaped. For the next few weeks we stayed in the gypsy camp, living in the shadow of the crematorium with constant dread that we would be killed. We never knew why that did not happen. Maybe we were saved by orders from Berlin to stop gassing the Jews. The Nazis by then must have known they were losing the war. Maybe they wanted to hide the evidence of their atrocities. Then in early January 1945, the SS began to order people out of the barracks to go on forced marches. "Raus, raus, out, out," they shouted. "Everybody out. We are taking you away for your own protection." We heard that thousands of people were now being marched deep into Germany. "I am not going to leave the barracks," I said to Miriam. "I am not going on any march." I figured that the Nazis had not been particularly nice to us when they were winning the war, so they certainly would not be any nicer when they were losing it. We stayed. To my surprise, no one came to get us. The Nazis were in such a hurry to get everybody out that they did not bother checking each barracks. Some of the twins remained with us, including Miss Csengeri and her daughters. At the time, I did not know that many people had also chosen to stay behind. The next morning, we woke up and realized we had missed roll call. We discovered that the Nazis were gone, or so it seemed. We saw no guards, no SS, no Dr. Mengele. The joy and happiness we felt, the Nazis were gone. Now we were on our way. I spent my time trying to find food, water, and blankets to keep my sister and me alive. One of the men prisoners had cut an opening in the barbed wire so that we could walk from one camp to another. Two girls and I went to search for things, roaming from area to area. I badly needed shoes. I was still wearing the ones from home that I had on when I arrived at Auschwitz. The soles kept flapping open. I tied them with string, but it was still rather hard to walk. Miriam's shoes were in better condition because she had stayed in the barracks to guard our few belongings whenever I went out organizing. The girls and I went to the place where the Nazis had kept all the clothes, shoes, and blankets they had taken from the prisoners. It was a huge building the Nazis called Canada, perhaps because they saw the country of Canada as a place of abundance. Piles of belongings rose to the ceiling. I rummaged through shoe after shoe after shoe, but I could not find any that fit, so I finally chose a pair that was 2 sizes too big. I filled the toe areas with some rags and tied them with string. At least my feet were now warm. I grabbed some coats and blankets for us and brought them back to the barracks where we bundled up. One afternoon I went to the kitchen to organize food. A couple of kids and some grown-ups who had stayed behind were already taking bread. Holding 4 or 5 bread loaves in my arms, I heard the strange sound of a car. The Nazis are gone, so whose car is coming? I wondered. We ran outside to see. There was a jeep-like car, and 4 Nazis holding machine guns jumped out and began spraying bullets in every direction. I remember seeing a barrel of a gun pointed at my head, 3 to 4 feet from me. Then I faded away. When I woke up, I thought I was dead. All around me, I saw bodies. Okay, so we are all dead, I thought. Then I moved my arms. Then I moved my legs. I touched the person beside me. But there was no movement. Her body was cold. Aha, she was dead, but I was alive. I stood up, thankful to be alive. I thought it must have been a guardian angel that made me faint before the bullets hit me, because I did not have any time to think or do anything to save myself. I raced back to the barracks. "Miriam!" I called as I burst inside. There she was. "What happened?" she asked, eyes rounded with fear. "The Nazis are back," I said, and added, I wonder why they are back. They almost killed me. I told her what had happened and how terrified I had been. We don't have any bread. I was so frightened I just ran for my life. Oh, Eva, she said, what if you had been killed? We did not talk about that what if anymore. We just hugged and hugged. That same night we were awakened by smoke and heat. Flames shot down from the roof. We could feel searing heat from the flames through the barrack walls. The barracks were on fire. We grabbed our stuff and ran outside. The Nazis were back at the camp, no longer in hiding, probably trying to destroy the evidence of their crimes. Flames reddened the sky as far as we could see. SS guards had blown up a crematorium and the building called Canada. Shirts and dresses from Canada flew through the air amidst the sparks and ashes. The Allies were attacking, and bombs lit the sky. It looked like the whole world was on fire. Thousands of people surged out of the rows and rows of barracks. The same SS guards I had seen at the kitchen lined us up for marching. Anyone who doesn't march quickly will be shot, screamed a guard. He shot randomly into the crowd as a warning. Miriam, stay with me, I whispered. We did not know where we were going. I held onto her hand very tightly. We worked our way into the middle of the group. It was safer than being in the front of the back, where we might attract attention. If they started shooting, we would be surrounded by other people. The crowd swept us along, being pushed and jostled in that big crowd. It was a struggle to stay in the middle. The SS kept shooting randomly as they herded us. Around us, bodies fell to the ground. Our fear increased. All of the children and the older people who had not been taken in the earlier marches were in this march. Later we learned that 8,200 people, including us, marched from Birkenau that night. In 1 hour, 1,200 were killed on the way. Only 7,000 people arrived at the barracks. Forced by the wave of the crowd, we finally arrived back at the barracks in Auschwitz. It was still the middle of the night, but the brick buildings glowed in the Klieg lights. Not knowing what would happen next, people started pushing hard, shoving to get inside the 2-story building. Miriam and I also raced toward those barracks for shelter. The SS guards inexplicably disappeared. And somehow, I cannot remember how it happened, somehow in the shuffle, I lost my twin sister. Miriam! Miriam! Where are you? I whirled around and around. She was not there, not anywhere. As I began to panic, my heart clobbered in my chest. My breath rushed out of me in short bursts. My face burned hot despite the cold. My eyes darting this way and that, filled with fearful tears. What if Miriam winds up in another barracks? I thought. What if she gets transported somewhere? What if she gets hurt? What if she dies? Who would know to tell me? What if I never see her again? I left the 2-story building and half walked, half ran from barrack to barrack, calling her name. Miriam! 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 I asked anyone and everyone whether they had seen a girl who looked just like me. Her name is Miriam, I told them. Miriam Mozes. Please, please, have you seen a girl named Miriam? Some kind people must have seen my desperation, my panic. They helped me by joining in, yelling her name. Miriam Mozes! Miriam Mozes! But no matter where I went, no matter where I looked, no matter how loudly I yelled, I could not find her. After a while, when Miriam did not answer, the people stopped helping me search. Keep searching, they urged me, pity in their eyes, their own exhaustion making their bodies limp. She has to be here somewhere. Miriam, Miriam! I did not let 30 seconds go by without yelling her name. While I saw pity and concern in some people's eyes, other people did not care, could not be bothered. So many of them had had enough, and did not have even an ounce of concern left for anyone else. So you're looking for your sister? Big deal. I don't have anybody. I wanted to yell at them that Miriam was more than a sister. She was my other self. Our survival depended on each other. I could not stop to think about these hopeless souls. I had to find her. I had to. I kept searching. Miriam, Miriam! I cried, my voice growing more hoarse, fainter. I was hungry and tired, but I did not allow myself to sit down to rest. I did not stop. Terrified, I went from one building to another, unable to give up my search. So many emaciated people, their thin prison garb clothing, their pitiful bodies were blocking my vision everywhere I looked. There seemed to be so many other people. They all looked the same to me because they were not Miriam. What could have happened to her? In one quick moment, dashing for safety, we had been separated. What had we done? I kept on. My legs shuffling forward, my arms pumping to keep me moving, I did not let myself think of hunger, of the pains in my gut, of the dryness making my tongue stick to the roof of my mouth. None of it mattered. Miriam! Miriam Mozes! Miriam! Hours and hours, minutes and minutes, seconds and seconds, all piled on top of another in my panic. I had been searching for 24 hours. No Miriam. She could not have simply disappeared. I refused to accept that. Where was she? I was stumbling about in a near stupor of desperation and exhaustion when I went through yet another doorway. Miriam! Miriam Mozes! Miriam! I bumped into someone about my height. Sorry. I was about to lurch past a person when it hit me. It was Miriam. Miriam! I fell into her arms. She fell into mine. Where were you? I've been looking. What happened? I have been searching for you, she insisted. What happened to you? We hugged, we kissed, gripping one another. We both slid to the floor to rest, crying and hanging on to each other. Eva, where were you? She asked me through her tears. We made such a mistake by racing. I thought I would never see you again. No, I could not think too much about that. I had to find you, I insisted. Then I admitted the truth to her. I was desperate. I sank into her arms, feeling like it was Hanukkah. It was a miracle. I had the strongest feeling of relief and love that I've ever felt in my whole life. I pulled away to look at her scrawny face and then put my arms around her again, holding her tight. Those 24 hours of searching for her had felt like forever. The more I held on to her, the more I felt sure we would never be parted again. I am so glad I've found you, I told her, filled with more emotion than I could express. Miriam reached out her hand. Look, she said. There she held a piece of chocolate. Someone gave me this when I was searching for you. My eyes opened wide. She offered it to me. I broke it in half, and we savored it in the sweetest of moments. From now on, always hold my hand, I said. Never let go. Miriam agreed. Yes, we must never be separated again. This is our lucky barracks, I said. Then let's take a little nap here, Miriam said, sinking lower against the wall. I'm so tired. Our hands tightly entwined, our bodies close for comfort, we shut our weary eyes. No matter what happened next, we knew we had each other.